The hour 10:15 having arrived, we'll call the House Tax Committee to order when we have a quorum. I've got a few announcements to make once we're officially on the record. But for now, what we'll do is when we have a quorum, I will move House File 1628. So members, we will look at 1628. You have the revenue note. And so Representative Quam, if you could please describe your bill for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And basically this is to fix an issue that's been ongoing about the taxing of components of durable equipment that are needed for it to operate. And I would prefer maybe the testifiers more eloquently touch on the subject.
Okay, please state your name and who you represent for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm a board member for the Minnesota Association of Medical Equipment Suppliers and Vice President at Key Medical Supply. We're here today, as Representative Quam indicated, to fix some lingering issues with the durable medical equipment sales tax policy. In 2013, the legislature exempted durable medical equipment, prosthetics, orthotics, and supplies, and extended the exemption to the accessories that were needed to make those pieces of equipment and prosthetics, orthotics work. In 2014, the legislature extended retroactive protection or retroactive coverage for that sales tax exemption, but the accessories and supplies were left off. So the durable medical equipment was exempted, but the accessories that make them work were not. So we're here today to fix that remaining component of the exemption, and then also to talk about the inclusion of insurance as an entity exemption for sales tax. Insurance reimbursement claims are all governed by federal policy and how they can be billed. We have no ability to add sales tax at the time of a transaction. We actually have to deliver product, wait until after the delivery in order to submit a claim, and it's unlike a retail transaction where we can have the price of the product charged at the same time as the sales tax. So it's important, because we have those federal rules that govern both how we bill Medicare and Medicaid claims as well as how we bill insurance claims, to have those entities treated the same way. We have exempted Medicare and Medicaid claims in Minnesota. We need that same issue handled with insurance, since our billing practices are the same across all of those lines. That's a brief description of our bill. My colleague and I are happy to take any questions from the committee, should there be any.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? We've seen this issue before. Any questions from committee members? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify for the bill or with concerns? Does the department wish to testify?
Not yet.
Okay. You will reserve your right. Yes, okay. Okay, so with that, we will take action on this as far as laying it over when we have a quorum, so we can't do that right now. So thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, item next.
Thank you.
Is the lady from Hopkins here? Okay, let's go to House File 1985, Lenczewski, sales tax June accelerated payments repealed. Welcome to your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move House File 1985 for possible inclusion. And
Chair Lenczewski moves House File 1985 for possible inclusion, and we'll take actual action on that when we do have a quorum. So if you could please present your bill.
Okay, and I don't have any amendments, and this should take 30 seconds. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you, who has a bill similar on this, similar to mine, with a little different effective dates, and Representative Knoblach, who you already heard his bill, which is identical to this bill. It's just buying back the June accelerated shift. So it's pretty simple. I think members in this committee understand it. I have no testifiers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Lenczewski. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to testify on behalf of this House File? House File 1985. Anyone with concerns? The department? Okay. Questions from members? And we know the bill. Okay, thank you, Chair Lenczewski.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we will take action on that when we do have a quorum. Okay, is the lady from Hopkins here? Okay, let's go to House File 2019, McDonald Annual City Celebration Sales Tax exemptions provided. And since they are 44.5 miles from here, we certainly want to get the testifiers. So members, it'll be my intention to go with this bill, and then the lady from Hopkins will be up next, and then there is another McDonald bill. Please present your bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, always a pleasure to follow Chair Lenczewski, especially after a 1985 bill. It was the year I graduated high school, so you got my support on that one. So, ladies and gentlemen, with me today are two good friends from Delano, Alex Rozier, Chair of the 4th of July Committee, and Jack Lynch, who's co-chair, or past chair of the 4th of July Committee. My bill today, I'm going to just read the overview basically. It provides a tax exemption for a city that designates an annual city celebration for cities with a population of less than 10,000. The exemption covers sales of prepared food, wine, beer sales, admissions to celebrations, and it does exempt bingo and other gambling activities. So with all the city celebrations that happens in this great state of Minnesota, I think that especially those that have a celebration of 5 days or less, it would be good tax policy that we allow these civic groups, the 501c3s, the 501c4s, and the cities to keep more of the money that they collect on popcorn, mini donuts, hot dogs, beer, et cetera, to keep that in the community that goes for nonprofit groups and for charitable great organizations and good deeds in the city. The end of the bill also gives a little amnesty for the city of Delano, which was audited by the Department of Revenue, and with a little glitch, there was a audit that indicated there was supposed to collect sales tax and pay it, but according to state statutes, all 501c3s, if they have a celebration of 5 days or less, are exempt from that sales tax. So that is the end of the bill. And with that, I will refer to my testifier, Mr. Alex Rozier, who is the chairman of the 4th of July Committee. Now, as many of you in this room have heard me talk and mention that Delano has the largest and oldest 4th of July parade in the state of Minnesota. And it happens on July 4th. Yeah, January 5th, yeah. So
Okay,
that's no shameless plug for the commercial, of course.
Okay, before we go into testimony, I will officially call the meeting to order of the House Tax Committee, as we do have a quorum. One announcement, and to Chair Lenczewski and to my friends on the DFL side of the aisle, we do have a bill up tomorrow. It's House File 1972, the Schumacher Revisers Bill, and it's my intention not to just lay that over, but to actually take action on that. So if you could kind of study that in the next 24 hours. If you have amendments to the Revisers Bill. If you have questions, you can talk to Michelle Timmons. It's kind of, there's supposed to be nothing controversial in there, so if you find something that gives us heartburn, we can certainly look at removing that part that gives us the heartburn. So that's supposed to be non-controversial, but that is one, I think it's the only one tomorrow that we would actually be taking a vote on. So I want to give you kind of a heads up so you can look at that the next 24 hours. Okay, so we will finish off this bill, then it's my intention, I'm going to go to the lady from Hopkins, and then we'll be going to the Knoblach bill. Some folks have some prior commitments here, and we certainly want to try and work with authors of the bill. So, tomorrow, House File 1972, Schumacher Bill, the Revisers Bill. We will be looking at taking action on that. So, please state your name and who you represent for the record, please, sir.
I'm Alex Rozier with the Delano 4th of July Committee.
Could you please spell your last name?
R-O-E-S as in Sam, E-R.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Rozier.
Thank you for having us. Jack?
And if you could say your name?
Jack Lynch, past
Chair.
past chair.
Did you wish to provide testimony, or are you here for questions, or what do you prefer?
Either or. We'd like to testify too, if we could.
You certainly can. Go ahead.
The thing is in the past, I mean, I go way back when I got out of the military. The 4th of July celebration has been well over 100 years in our community. And in the last 20 years, the tax laws have seemed to have gotten a lot more confusing. We had an issue about 10 years ago, I'm going to say, and we ended up having the understanding that if it was not held over 4 days, that we didn't have to pay taxes. So we thought, great, we don't have to pay the taxes, we'll keep the celebration under 4 days. Well, then 2 years ago, we got audited, and they came in and said, no, you got to be paying taxes on everything. Well, number one, our event is free for the public. We don't charge anybody to come down to the park. They can enjoy our fireworks, come down, and the kids can go on some rides and things like that. We don't make that much money to where we felt that we should have to be paying all these different taxes. Our money, the Legion is part of one of the organizations. We give a lot of our money away during the year to different events, to the St. Cloud VA Hospital, to the Veterans Club up in around Duluth and stuff like that. We raise the vast amount of money that we give away to the community on the 4th of July. The athletic club is the same way. The sportsman's club is the same way. I mean, that's where we raise our money to give. And now we're hit with a $38,000 fine that's probably going to take us 3 or 4 years to pay. I guess we're here to say, I would hope that you would rethink that. I mean, it's one event, 4 days. That's all we do. And moving forward, I guess I would just like to see the new bill adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Roser.
When we talk about the town celebrations, ours, obviously we feel very strongly about ours. It's our hometown. I grew up in Delano, but when we take a look at events all across the state, we were very surprised and to learn that all of a sudden we were not exempt and all of a sudden we owed all of this money. And as we found out, the further we talk with the Revenue Department, that we aren't the only celebration across the state that is going to be audited and that this is going to go on. My concern is not just for us, but for all the little town celebrations across the state. These are the things that make us our communities. These are the things that bring us together and that are important to us. They're things that we pass on to our kids. And adding the tax laws and making it more cumbersome for us to actually run these events and do these things is challenging. And, as we talk about the consequences of this is that, we don't have, quite honestly, we don't have the money to pay that money back. We don't make that type of money over the event. Our entertainment is free, our fireworks are free, our parade is free. All of the different family events that we do, from our kiddie parades to everything, we do all of this, out of the proceeds from our food stands and from our beverage stands. And with that revenue going away, or being cut into, it puts a real burden into doing those things for those kids. And I know we're not the only ones in this boat. Across the state with all the different events, they're looking at the same thing. We're here today to basically say we really appreciate Representative McDonald and putting this bill out there and bringing it to your attention. And we really hope that you guys are able to include this and make a difference in all of our communities across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, is there anyone in the audience wish to testify on behalf of this bill with concerns? The department? You want to go up here? Let's get the testimony on that I have on my list. I have Chair Carlson for questions. So if you gentlemen could stick around here, there may be some questions from committee members. Please state your name and who you represent for the record, please, sir.
Greetings, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Paul Cummings, and I'm the Tax Policy Manager at the Minnesota Department of Revenue.
Welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to be a resource on this bill. Mr. Chair, I will only be commenting on the portion of the bill that deals with amnesty today, Section 2. This bill creates an amnesty for a nonprofit that organized and ran a city celebration held before July 1st, 2015, on behalf of a group of nonprofit organizations, of which all the net proceeds were distributed to a combination of 501c3 and 501c4 nonprofits. Minnesota statutes, Chapter 270B, prevents disclosure of taxpayer identifiable data. Mr. Chair, our vision at the Department of Revenue is that all taxpayers reports, pays, and receives the right amount, no more, no less. This provision would provide one or a few taxpayers a period of retroactive amnesty because sales tax were not collected and remitted as required by statute. So this would treat this entity differently than other businesses and organizations that do follow requirements to collect and remit sales tax. Mr. Chair, as it relates to nonprofits and other charitable organizations, what taxes are asked to be collected. At times that can be complicated. And so as you're looking at this, just looking at all of the various ways in which decisions are made and impacts the types of nonprofits, that would be helpful as well. And I know that you're trying to do that in Section 1, Mr. Chair, as you're relating to city celebrations. Overall, Mr. Chair, we appreciate the opportunity to be a resource and look forward to continuing the conversation about this bill in Section 2 throughout session.
Thank you. Representative McDonald, why don't you grab a chair and join the floor? We'll have everybody up there if there are questions for members. Are there any questions for members? Chair Carlson?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions, or at least one, and then a comment, but maybe this is for the author. Why was a population of 10,000 chosen? Is that the population of Delano or
Representative
one of the
McDonald.
other communities that are impacted?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, no, the population of Delano is not 10,000. We're 5,638 approximately, and most of my cities are under 5,000. That seemed to be the threshold of the average city, I suppose, throughout the 800 and some cities throughout the state. I don't have a really good answer for you on that.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Chair
if
Carl.
I may, then the reason I raised that question, before redistricting, I represented Robbinsdale, and they had one of the oldest celebrations in the state. It's called the Robbinsdale Whiz Bang Day Parade. And Robbinsdale, if I recall correctly, is about 14,000. When you have a cut line here, and I don't know if they go back 100 years, but I do know they go back to the 1920s at least, so they're approaching 100 years probably. And then the city of Crystal, which is a little larger than Robbinsdale, has the Crystal Frolics, and then you've got the New Hope city, which these are all relatively small suburban communities. They're not the size of, let's say, a Brooklyn Park or some of those, but they're not super large either. And when you have an arbitrary cut line like that, and I'll just focus using Robbinsdale as an example, being that I no longer represented, I don't necessarily have a vested interest other than having been the representative for 30 years. I still kind of have a fondness for them, but they're just above the cut line. And I think that's a bit problematic. I understand what you're trying to do to help perhaps those smaller communities, but when you have an arbitrary cut line, you leave some out.
Representative McDonald?
Mr. Chair, Representative Carlson, I completely agree with you. And as a matter of fact, I would like to offer an amendment. At this time, I can't because of the 24-hour rule. I would remind the chair that I do have an amendment to the bill, which I'll have maybe Ms. Dalton read and why it's there. But I am,
Representative McDonald, we have no rules.
oh, yeah, that's right. Well, in that case,
Well, there's basically one rule.
yeah, one rule, your rule. I like it.
Okay.
Well, I would be friendly, if there was a friendly oral amendment and no argument against it as to why we wouldn't want to increase that population, I would accept that.
Yeah, well,
Carl?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what the appropriate number would be. My biggest dilemma is having a cut line, and perhaps at all, on something like this. I suspect if I threw out 20,000, there'd be somebody that would say, well, we represent a community that's got 21 or 22, so maybe not having any cut line might be the best approach to something like this. With the other criteria, it still narrows it down with the number of days and so on.
Is that your amendment then, no cut line? I like it.
Just wait, we do have an actual amendment here. What does your A2 amendment do, Representative McDonald?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to have Ms. Dalton.
Ms. Dalton?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, What the A2 amendment does is it just corrects a cross-reference. There was an A left out of the section.
I did catch it, that's right, that's what this is for.
Yeah, it's a technical
Yes,
fix.
So, Representative McDonald has moved 2019, we have that before us. Representative McDonald moves the H201982 amendment. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion prevails. We now have the bill as amended in the shape the author likes. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Committee, we have a couple options we could look at here. We could remove the 10,000, we could leave it for now, and if we see this bill again, we could work on it. Chair Carlson.
Well, with your comment there, I'd leave it to the chair. What I was going to suggest before your comment was that perhaps we could just strike the 10,000, but
Well, that's
if-
fine. If it's fine with the author, we could do that.
he seemed to be open to that.
Representative McDonald?
Yes, that's fine with me, Chair Carlson.
Ms.
And
Dolan,
Mr.
could you
Chair.
read the amendment? To the bill as amended?
Mr. Chair.
Line 1.13?
Page 1, line 12, delete with A. Page 1, line 13, delete population of less than 10,000.
So then it would read, rural charter city may designate one event. Okay. Questions to the amendment?
I'll move that amendment. Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Carlson moves the amendment. Further discussion? Anyone from the audience wish to testify for the amendment or with concerns? Department? Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wouldn't this change the fiscal note
Ms. Dahl?
or the note from the Department of Revenue?
Mr. Chair, Representative Erickson, yes, it would. For instance, this would now cover things like the Aquatennial or the St. Paul Winter Carnival, if they were designated as a city celebration for those cities.
Or the one
And those would have much larger impacts than the ones that are currently covered by the bill.
Okay. Further discussion? Representative McDonald?
Yes, if the Aquatennial, Minneapolis Aquatennial and the St. Paul Winter Carnival, which are great events, by the way, if they're, I believe they're more than 5 days, and if I'm incorrect, someone correct me.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I stand corrected, yes, they are
That's
more than
amazing.
5. They are more than 5 days currently, although they could change how they structure themselves.
Mr.
Chair?
Yes, Representative Davis.
When a member actually is able to correct staff, don't they have to buy a round of drinks or something?
I think so.
You know, treats, something at the next
It's
meeting?
rare. It's
Yeah, exactly.
extremely rare.
It's like a hole-in-one, right?
Okay, same thing.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
right
you,
after the
Mr. Chair.
governor's speech tomorrow.
Okay, so with that, further discussion of the amendment, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion prevails. Any other questions? So Representative McDonald renews his motion, 20, House File, I'm sorry, you're right, I'm sorry, Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I supported the last amendment, and I thought it was a great idea. But I have the opposite problem, because you know what? That Aquatennial is really nice, but it is actually a regional celebration. Events take place outside of the city of Minneapolis, even though it started in the city of Minneapolis. And my problem is what you just described, Representative McDonald, in your community, is what my neighborhood festivals are. And they have raised money for scholarships for kids who can't afford to be on the local park team. They raise money to pay for the Halloween games and treats at the local park building. I live in a big city called Minneapolis, but we actually really think of ourselves as small town people, and I live in the small town of Wyndham Park. And the Wyndham Park Festival is coming up June 20th. And and it will do exactly what you're talking about. Have free activities, some entertainment, you know, there'll be a silent auction, there'll be all kinds of cheap games for kids to play and win little trinkets. You know, it's exactly what you're saying. And it really does create opportunities in the community for the rest of the year, unlike some things that are maybe more like marketing, like the Aquatennial. And so I think if this emerges in the ultimate bill, I think I would like to have an amendment that says, that recognizes the small communities that do this exact same thing, that happen to just be within the borders of a larger group. And we don't raise a lot of money, but I can tell you the scholarships that allow kids to play on the soccer team or the baseball team that come from some of our low-income families are cherished. And it's by this kind of activity that it happens.
Representative Loeffler, what's the name of that event?
It is Windy Fest. It used to be the Wyndham Park Ice Cream Social, and they thought that seemed a little old-fashioned, so now they rebranded. We're the Windy Fest.
You know, I'm trying to memorize every high school team name, every college team name. I'm not going to do town celebrations. I'm just not going to do it. Okay, with that, Ms. Dalton.
Mr. Chair,
Tommy's.
Representative Loeffler, those events may already be covered. It really depends on who the money is going to. If that event is organized by a 501c3 and it is used for charitable or educational purposes, the proceeds, they already have a fundraising exemption. I think what's unusual about this city celebration, which led to this bill, was the fact that they are, the celebration is run by an organization that is made up of both 501c3s and 501c4s. And so some of the money is not used for what's allowed under the 501c3s. Some of it's used for civic activities as well.
Representative Loeffler.
So, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Dalton. Now, this doesn't raise money for the same purposes, but I have I think, a 501c4, which is the Northeast Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce, which does organize the annual Celebrate Northeast celebration, which includes a parade. So they may not fall under that as well. So we need to do a little more research, Mr. Chair.
A little more work. Any other questions from members? Okay, Representative McDonald renews his motion, House File 2019 as amended, be later for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, everyone. With that,
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
with that, Representative Simonson moves the minutes of April 7th, 2015. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, all fair say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative Simonson. Okay, item next, we are going to mix it up here a little bit. I'm going to go with Chair Knoblach as there's some prior commitments here, and then we'll go to the lady from Hopkins. I apologize for that, but this last one took a little longer than I figured it would. So let's go to Chair Knoblach, who's House File 2134. So members, if you take that out of your packet, 2134. Are there any amendments? No amendments. Okay, Chair Knoblach, you have moved House File 2134. Before we get started, is there anyone wish to testify for House File 2134 from the crowd here, or audience? Is there anyone that wish to testify with concerns? Is the department wanting to testify? Okay, Chair Knoblach.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Tax Committee. House File 2134 is a simple bill. It basically says that nonprofit BMX tracks that meet certain criteria that are operated as 501c3s are exempt from the sales tax on their admissions. We have a BMX track in my area. There aren't very many of them out there. I think there's 7 of them across the state that would be covered by this particular bill. But these are small nonprofits. They don't take salaries. And I think that given the size of them, it's kind of a burden for them to be paying sales tax. And I do have Mark Post, who runs the St. Cloud area BMX track, that's here to testify. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'll have him say a few words in support of the bill.
Certainly. Please state your name for the record and who you represent.
I'm Mark Post, and I run Pineview Park BMX in St. Cloud.
Post as in P-O-S-T?
P-O-S-T.
Welcome to the committee, sir.
And how this all came about is we were audited last year, and through the 15 years I've been operating the track, we never thought we had to pay sales tax on our entry fees. And we do pay sales tax on our concessions, but we thought we were exempt from the entry fees. And what came about was the only exemption that's in the code is for golf courses holding events for 501c3s. And I felt like we should be in there with the golf courses. So we run the track completely as volunteers. We don't get paid anything for doing it. We do it for the kids. Like he said, there's 7 tracks in the state that fall under this category. I believe there's about 4 more that are not 501c3s, but do run as a volunteer organization, nonprofit organizations. But so I got started in this just to give the kids something to do, to promote good family fun and sportsmanship, and respecting others and stuff, and it's just good for the kids and it keeps them out of trouble. We do it in cooperation with the city on city parkland. We take care of the park, so the city has benefited from not having the burden of maintaining the park. We take care of it. So it's a win-win all the way around. It was a vandalized park, and the area businesses are happy we're there. And it's just a good situation. And the burden of having this tax would either make us increase fees and make it limited for others, or we're one of the more profitable tracks, so the smaller tracks it would be a huge burden on them, and they would probably go under. So I hope you see fit to exempt us from this tax.
Thank you, Mr. Post. This is like bicycles?
Bicycle.
So there's no motors?
No motors.
Why is it called motocross then?
Moto.
M-O-T-O.
Every round is called a moto, M-O-T-O.
What is the moto?
It's a race. One race is called a moto.
Cousin of Quappy.
One round.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I've done it.
I have.
A few times.
I don't. And I really don't care to at this point.
Oh, we were going to offer you a free ticket, Mr. Chair.
I'll watch. Okay, was there anyone in the audience, the department, doesn't want to testify? Okay, questions for members? Moto, like quasi? Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, my question is for Mr. Post. Why do you think you were suddenly audited by the Department of Revenue?
Mr. Post.
Actually, one of our key volunteers at this time is an employee of the Minnesota Revenue Service.
Have you considered other employees? Nothing personal, Paul.
So
Paul,
you got us all in line.
Nothing personal. Okay, yes, Chair Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Knoblach, or to your testifier. Just trying to think, the Blaine facility, the velodrome, or I think that's what it's called. Anyway, I spent a lot of time up there for my kids playing soccer, but they actually have a huge biking facility there too. Is that getting the same treatment in this bill?
Mr. Post?
I don't know how that operates, if it's a 501c3 or what it is.
Ms. Dalton, to the Lenczewski question.
Mr. Chair, Representative Lenczewski, the velodrome is not a BMX sanctioned facility. Motocross is something different than bicycle racing,
Right.
or it's a variation on bicycle racing. So this has to be sanctioned, the track has to be sanctioned essentially by one of the regional sanctioning bodies for BMX to qualify. So this would not apply to the velodrome up at the Blaine Sports Center.
Chair Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's just something to think about going forward, will we treat all the other recreational activities the same? So for example, a new emerging bike racing event happens in my community, and it's mountain biking. And they are now creating tracks and having competitive races for fat tires. So, I think just something for the committee to think about. It's preferring sort of one sort of activity of racing. They're all non-motorized. But, just to think about as you put your bill together.
Chair Lenczewski, I tried the mountain biking thing at Lutzen one time, and I very quickly went over to the Alpine slide. That is hard work. Oh, man. Okay, questions for Mr. Post or Chair Knoblach? Chair Knoblach.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was thinking Mr. Post might say something about this in his testimony, but I did want to ask him if he could talk a little bit about his family's involvement and his children's in BMX racing, because I think people might find that interesting.
Mr. Post?
Well, we started the track in '97, organizing a group of volunteers and stuff, and Pineview Park actually started from my son Nick suggesting that why can't we have a track in St. Cloud? It's just a bunch of piles of dirt, and so that developed, and with a group of volunteers we met with the city and got the track going, and our daughter, who was 7 at the time, started racing, and she actually took it to the highest levels and competed in the 2012 Olympics in the sport. So that tells a lot about why we're so involved with it. And it's just been an awesome thing for our family. We travel together around the country, around the world, seen places we would have never seen without it, so,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Post. Any other questions from members? With that, Chair Knoblach renews his motion that House File 2134 be included in the omnibus tax bill. We'll lay it over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Chair Knoblach, and thank you, Mr. Post.
Thank you,
With
member.
that, we will go to the lady from Hopkins, but before we do that, I will move House File 1628 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. I will move that Chair Lenczewski moves House File 1985. We didn't amend anything on that. Be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. So members, we're looking at House File 1704, which I will move at this point. And then we have another McDonald bill and a Garofalo bill. So with that, welcome to the committee. Okay, I can see we're off to a good start here.
Thank you, Chair. I have to apologize that I wasn't here when you asked me first. I had to go back and get the cookies I made. It is my first stop as a freshman in this committee, and I uphold tradition, so. Those are peanut butter chocolate chip. Hopefully nobody's allergic. And I will.
Well, one break of protocol, and normally they start here.
I am so sorry. I did not know
Next
that
bill. Oh, okay.
Note to self, if I come before the committee again,
Welcome.
I'll make up for it and bring cookies again, so.
Thank you, and welcome. The committees look delicious here. Okay, so with that, I will move House File 1704. If you could please describe your bill, please.
Yes, thank you for moving House File 1704 for discussion. This is a bill that was brought to me by the Department of Natural Resources, and I have Bob Meyer here, the Assistant Commissioner from the DNR, to answer any technical questions. House File 1704 is a very short bill. It's 2 words. It simply adds "and Parks and" to the Local Trails Connection Program that the DNR administers. This bill would give communities a chance to apply to the DNR for grant funding to enhance where their local funding is falling short. The bill is in front of your committee today because the funding for the Local Trails Connection Program comes from the in lieu lottery proceeds. As a former Hopkins City Council member, I understand how tough it is sometimes for our local communities to fund their amenities such as parks, and trying to find money to update and improve them for safety and accessibility standards and to the level of services that their citizens have come to expect. Many local governments have tried to apply in the past for the funding under the Parks and Trails Legacy Grant Program, but do not currently qualify because that program is geared towards only regional parks. Providing a local park funding source is supported by the Legacy Advisory Committee, the DNR, Met Council, and the Greater Minnesota Regional Park and Trail Commission. Demand for local park funding was identified in the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan that was completed by the DNR. And I would appreciate your support. And once again, I have Bob Meyer here to answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Meyer, would you like to make any comments, or you want to be a resource, or?
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, we appreciate Representative Youakim carrying this bill for us and being here today. This bill just provides consistency amongst the 3 projects or the 3 lottery and loop programs that we have. If you can see in the bill on lines 21.18, 22.5% of the receipts are deposited for state parks and trails, 22.5% are for Metropolitan Parks and Trails grants, and previously, current law only allows a 3% to be used on local trail grants. This will allow that percentage of money to be also be eligible for parks as well. So there is a demand out there to have this be consistent with the 3 projects that are 3 funding programs that are there right now, and also in line with the Parks and Trails Legacy funding that is out there. Just a note on that, this program does require a 25% match, and that match cannot be legacy funds, so you can't leverage one grant program against the other.
Representative Loeffler?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, this is state in lieu money, so it's state taxes, and we've always kind of given a preference to the parks and the facilities that serve people outside of your local area. That to be a metropolitan regional park, you have to demonstrate that you serve far beyond the local needs of a local neighborhood or a local local population, and the same is true of the state parks and the others. And I always thought that the reason it was located, that we gave preference to trails was because the trails tend to connect to other trails. And there's like not as much incentive for a city to put a lot of money into a trail if they, they have to pay for half a mile that might be used mostly by people going through their community to connect up to one of those regional or state trails. And so I'm wondering if we're thinking about and maybe for Mr. Meyer, if by broadening this, we're going to actually make it harder for those bike trails to get connected that cross through cities that right now are expected to pick up those connections. I have a lot of bikers in my area, and they're always saying, talking about the gaps in the system, and they would really like to see us continue to incent communities to fill those gaps in, so that we actually have a web across the strait no matter where you live. And so I'm wondering whether or not, property taxes pay for local parks, the fields, the soccer fields, the basketball hoops, whatever, but whether we really ought to think about continuing to give preference to that, completing the trail web.
Mr.
Meyer.
Chairman, Representative Loeffler, that's a great question, and part of the eligibility requirements require that these projects have significant regional or statewide significance. So the connector of a trail like you're talking about going from one community to another would have that regional significance. If there were to be a regional park component that would be in there as well, that would be a significant component of that as well. So we're trying to incorporate those demands that are out there and provide some consistency among the grant programs. I don't think it would prohibit that. We're trying to do this for consistency. Some communities have brought the fact to us that this should be parks and trails since everything else is parks and trails right now. So I understand your concern, but that would be a project such as that would rank high amongst the candidates because of its regional significance.
To the author of the bill, to the Loeffler question.
Chair Davids, Representative Loeffler, I understand your concern, and the way I look at this, especially with Hopkins, we are a 2-by-2 mile city, so there are surrounding communities that end up using our local parks, and we do have 3 trails that run through us, connecting regional trails, and some of our parks have become trailheads, and the amenities are used by people outside the city, and it's been hard for us to keep up with that. And like Mr. Myers said, this is they can apply for these grants, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be granted that. So if there's processes in place to make sure that ones that serve the most people rise to the top in the grant process, I think that will kind of take care of a little bit of the concern.
Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you. And I'm not familiar with the grant program and what the criteria is, and it's not in the statute. I mean, it sounds like some of the criteria would give preference to that, but just putting it in the statute, I would think we'd have 854 cities thinking, oh, we need a new soccer field, let's apply for a grant. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone that wishes to testify on behalf of this bill, House File 1704? Anybody with concerns? The department, does the department wish to testify? Okay, Chair Draskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Meyer, so, as I look at this and look at the breakout, it looks like, we could do a variety of things in reallocating portions of this formula, including we could put some of it in the general fund to provide tax relief to Minnesotans or a variety of other things, depending on what your priorities are as a legislator. But characterize, if you will, for us how much additional money in the last decade has gone to Parks and Trails from the Legacy Act.
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Draskowski, first of all, these dollars are not general fund dollars. These dollars come from the lottery that are paid to the Department of Revenue based upon the percentage of sales tax. So it's money that you and I, if you're buying a lottery ticket, rather than paying sales tax at the store, that sales tax rate goes to the Department of Revenue to be used for these purposes. Part of that goes to the general fund. The legacy proceeds, Mr. Chairman, I can't give you a specific number, but the Parks and Trails is the smallest percentage of the proceeds that are out there. So 33.5% go to the Clean Water Fund, 33.5% goes to the Outdoor Heritage Fund, and then the Arts and Cultural Heritage, I believe, get 14%, And the parks and trails, I think, only get 7 or 10% of that. So maybe Representative Wills has a correct percentage of that, but I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what that is.
Mr. Drazkowski?
I think it's like 19.5% or 19.75%, and that third of the fund, of course, gets about $1 million, or $100 million a year. So if you took that over the last 8 years of the, or 6 years, how many years has it been? 7 years coming up on of the legacy. That would be $140 million or $130 million, somewhere in there. That has been, in the last 6 or 7 years, pumped into parks and trails. I guess I would have a question for staff. Is this, this breakout we see in the bill summary, is this constitutionally directed, or is it statutorily derived?
Mr. Clement? Lehman?
Mr. Chair and Representative Drazkowski, I believe that's statutorily required.
Chair Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. So, Mr. Chair, I mean, ostensibly, the bill could say, instead, send that money to the general fund and allow, you know, the legacy fund to fund these things, which, you know, I've got some questions, too, about the implications of us extending more money in some of these areas, and then the inflexibility that the constitutional amendment provides us around this. Says that you can supplement but cannot supplant. So the legacy dollars could supplement but not supplant something existing. So once we add additional money in there from some other source, like this one, if in the future we would want to pull that money back, we would create either a current or potentially future constitutional violation. And so that's a concern. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any comments from Mr. Meyer or the author?
Mr.
The
Chair,
author?
I understand the concerns about the legacy fund. That's been a discussion ongoing since it was enacted. This is actually lottery funds in lieu of sales tax dollars, and it's been there as long as the lottery's been there, and statutorily the divisions are there. All local governments are asking for is just a chance at the pot of money that's there that's supposed to help enhance trail connectors, enhance local, have the locals have the same chance as the others do, other jurisdictions do, to apply for the grant funding.
Chair Drazkowski, what you're saying is if we would fund it in this way and then pull back, that could create some problems.
Well, we see this, this give and take and tug and pull in the whole legacy area, Mr. Chair, over and again. And every time that we extend money, whether from the general fund or another special fund that is not legacy, it puts us in a position that if there is existing legacy there that we want to reduce and move somewhere else or whatever, we've got inflexibility there because of the existence or the pushing of this additional money into that area. So I think we need to be cognizant of that as a legislature, and certainly the advocates of the legacy amendment use the language in the amendment as a leverage to try to leverage and bring with it as much general fund and other non-legacy money as they can and tie it up through that particular constitutional reality. So I'm concerned about that in a variety of areas, in all areas, but this is certainly an example of that.
Okay. Representative Wills and then Dabney. Representative Wills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to that point, and I understand the concerns, although I just wanted to comment that there's a difference in how the legacy funds can be used and how this funding can be used. And in my understanding, because of the supplement and supplant argument, and we have to be very careful to not use legacy funds in place of general fund money as a supplanting type purpose. For the funds that are being addressed in this bill, my understanding, and the author can correct me or clarify, would be used for maintenance and improving these parks areas and purposes that we would not be allowed to use legacy funds for, because legacy funds have to be used for a new project as opposed to maintaining a current project. Would that be correct?
To the author.
Chairs Davids and Representative Willis, you're correct, and Bob Myers had mentioned that before too, that this is supposed to, you can't use legacy funds to leverage, you still have to have a local match to achieve this grant, and it can't be legacy funds. So this is a very directed, and it's not extra money being added in, there's the money that's there, and it's just being able to apply for that pool of money.
Representative Wills.
So used for a different purpose is how it's, how this particular funding is used. So it couldn't be used for the same purpose as legacy funds would be used for.
To the
Right.
author.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Wills.
Thank you.
Chair Dabney.
Oh, I'll let it pass.
Gentleman from Lyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question kind of on, from the city of Hopkins, you were a former council person there. Through the charitable gaming portion, like the pull tabs and that, cities have the option of taking 10% from charitable organizations within their city boundaries. Does the city of Hopkins participate in that 10%?
To the author.
Yes, I believe we do, and that's been a discussion. We don't have a lot of entities that do pull tabs, and the pull tabs that actually are in our city are run for our hockey league. And then actually it kind of addresses the other, the other bills that you had was for our Raspberry Festival as a pull tab. So those funds, so we also help add to that with maintaining, the hockey league actually is in one of our buildings, and we help with capital improvements on that building. So we kind of work together. The Raspberry Festival, we provide police and barricades in the parks and stuff, so we kind of use our 10% to help supplement and add to those activities that they're using their lottery funding for, too.
Gentleman from Lyon.
Thank you. In earlier your testimony, you talked about how it's hard for cities to be able to come up, especially when it comes to that matching portion. Would you foresee that the city would use some of their matching dollars that they would have to do in order to apply for this? Because you can't use legacy funds, would you use the money that you take from local charitable organizations to do your local match?
No, actually, in the city, thank you, Chair, sorry about that. In our city, we actually use, right now, the only pool of money that we use to enhance our parks are the park dedication fees for redevelopment, and we've been very lucky in Hopkins, even 2 by 2 miles, the last few years, the investments we've made has spurred redevelopment. And then we also put a small franchise fee for parks that we went out to the public and asked them what they thought, and they agreed with it, so we put a franchise fee. So I would see Hopkins using that pool of money to leverage to get if they even applied for the grants.
Gentleman from Lyon.
Thank you.
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, the change we're talking about in this bill are for grants to local units of government outside the 7-county metropolitan area. So that the language that's in the bill already with 22.5% for the Metropolitan Council is the projects that Representative Wills was speaking about, that money goes directly to the Met Council and out to the participating entities. So the change we're talking about is only for greater Minnesota projects on parks and trails.
Gentleman from Lyon. Good. Chair Carlson, and maybe you could get those cookies coming back this way. Delicious.
Mr. Chairman, maybe there was a reason why those cookies didn't start with the chair. But that wasn't my question.
Oh. Point well taken. Point well taken. Chair Carlson.
I'll pass them all back. There we go.
Thank you.
Well, my serious comment or question is of Mr. Meyer, and when we talked about legacy funds and other funds, where does the LCCMR grants play into this, if at all? Because they often have, DNR requests grants for trails and parks and so on through LCCMR. So is there any interaction with what we're talking about here with the LCCMR grants?
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carlson, not at this point in time. Previously, there have been projects or grant programs that have been funded through the LCCMR, I believe with other sources of funding probably as well, when there was unrefunded. There's some cigarette tax money in there and some oil overcharge or surcharge dollars as well. but not recently. The projects that you may be thinking of would be specific parks or trails projects that the department applies to or submits a grant application to the LCCMR for, and also local communities can do the same thing. So it doesn't prohibit anybody from doing that. This is just a grant program that's actually established in statute with these lottery proceeds for Greater Minnesota.
Yeah, okay.
Chair
and
Carlson?
Maybe other, as Mr. Meyer pointed out, LCCMR does have a blend of other funds, but the lottery is some of what goes into LCCMR. In fact, a significant amount of it is LCCMR, or is lottery. But thank you.
Chair Torkelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if you've already plowed this field, but I'm curious about this designation of local parks and trails. Is that exclusively non-metro, or is it, how does the definition of local, how is it defined? I guess?
Mr. Chairman, Representative
Sorry,
Torkelson.
we've already talked about this.
The lottery and lieu proceeds are specifically outlined in statute, as you can see in the bill, and the 3% that is going here that we're looking to expand parks into is covered under our regional trail grant program, which is established in statute 85.019. So it specifically says for grants for outside the 7-county metropolitan area. The metropolitan area does receive a percentage of these proceeds, as we've spoken. Just like the legacy dollars are split metro, state, and greater Minnesota. The lot, I think that's where the template basically came from in the past, is the lottery and lieu funds.
Chair Torkelson. Any other questions from members? Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Meyer, about how many million does a 3% equal?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Erickson, funding for FY16 is anticipated to be a little bit over $1 million, $1,005,000.
Chair Erickson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's not much. When you think of the whole scheme of this in lieu of taxes.
Any other questions from members? Okay, with that, I will renew my motion. House File 1704 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Treats were wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will go to item next. Representative McDonald moves House File 2017. I see no amendments at this time. Representative McDonald, if you could please, excuse me, present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Mr. Chair, when I had the Delano folks in front of me, you didn't have the opportunity to impress them with your knowledge of what our mascot is for school.
The Tigers.
Excellent.
Is it?
Very good. Yes, the Delano Tigers. Well done. Are you surprised?
Tigers or Cardinals, you got a pretty good shot. Is it really the Delano Tigers?
Well, certainly. You knew that.
Do I have a hat?
I'll get you one.
Okay. I'll pay for it first.
All right, perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're not lobbying. You can just give me one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not lobbying anything other than this bill right now. So, members, how many of you have teenagers who download iTunes music? Raise your hand. All right. And adults. What else? How many here have little kids that are addicted to Minecraft? Yeah, and they download everything. And they have to, hey, for $5.99 they can buy this such and such a thing.
Representative McDonald, I don't understand a thing you just said.
You'd like Minecraft, Mr. Chairman.
You would?
Yeah. You're a smart man, it's for smart kids.
Okay.
So, well, in front of you is a bill that will repeal a tax, a digital download tax that was imposed last year. And I'm not doing this just to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to undo what you did. But this is a digital download is not a tangible item that you exchange. It's not a relationship between a customer and a business that exchange something tangible, a CD, a disc, a book, a game, and so on and so forth. This is a service, if you will. And I don't think you can argue that it's not a service when you down something electronically. The state has always had a history of not taxing a service. So therefore, I present you a bill that would repeal this tax because it is a non-tangible service from person, customer, to business. So with me today is a guest of mine who's going to testify. He's an expert in the field. And Steve, who is, as you see, from Washington DC, but he is from Bismarck, North Dakota originally, and spent some time here in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, when he was going to law school. He's going to give just a little of expert testimony on digital download and the tax and the implications of that tax. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Bismarck, how far is that from Jamestown?
About 100 miles.
You know what the Jamestown University mascot is?
I don't, but my father graduated from Jamestown, so I should know that.
The Jimmies.
I thought it's the Frackers, not the
Now, just, I have to get something clarified here. Mr. Michael, this repeals, this doesn't repeal the fourth tier, does it?
Oral amendment?
No, okay. For the record, that was a no. Okay, welcome to the committee, sir. Please state your name and who you represent for the record, please, sir.
My name is Steve Kranz. I'm a lawyer with McDermott, Will & Emery, a law firm in their D.C. office, and I practice in their state and local tax group. I'm a specialist, as Representative McDonald said, in taxation of digital content and digital services, and I've worked on this issue for many, many years. Earlier in my career, served as the president of the Business Advisory Council to the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board, where some of the definitions that are included in this repeal legislation or exemption legislation were developed, and sat there as a representative of the business community as they were developed and worked on them. There are really just a couple of quick points that I'd like to make for you, and if you've got any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them. One, obviously, this has a positive impact on Minnesota consumers. I think more important from where I sit is its impact on Minnesota business and the business climate here for high-tech companies. Even as recognized in the revenue analysis done in support or as part of this legislation, the revenue analysis recognizes that between 10 and 70% of the businesses that sell this type of content that would be covered by the bill are outside of the state. So the fact that there is a sales tax on the books in Minnesota applying to these transactions, what it really means is you can only collect that sales tax when those items are sold by a Minnesota company to a Minnesota consumer, and you're imposing that burden on your Minnesota high-tech businesses. You cannot, because of the Constitution, impose that on out-of-state companies. Now, most of my time I spend working on the federal legislative effort to pass marketplace fairness, which is the legislation passed in the Senate last year, reintroduced in the Senate this year. It's been stuck in the House, but that's the legislation that would overturn the Quill case and solve the remote sales tax collection for the states. I'm deeply involved in that, and until that passes, no state can impose tax on the digital content and service community without hurting their in-state companies. Now, to give you a brief sense of what's going on around the country, as indicated in my written letter testimony, there are 17 other states that tax this type of content right now. 16 of them did so by a specific legislative imposition. Two of the 18 total have broad sales taxes that even apply to lawyers and accountants, if you can believe that. I say that jokingly, but the trend, and that was a trend that developed probably 8 years ago. The trend more recently has been for states to consider exemption bills like the one put forth by Representative McDonald. Just about 2 weeks ago, Idaho passed and the governor signed an exemption bill to cover much of the digital content world. Michigan and Vermont has a hearing later this week on an exemption bill to cover part of the digital content and online service world. Michigan has been moving a bill steadily through the process there. So the trend legislatively has been to undo taxes that were imposed on this world, in large part because the legislative community is recognizing the harm caused to their in-state business community, disadvantaging them over out-of-state companies that can get away with not collecting tax as a result of the Quill issue. With that, I'll stop and answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz. First of all, is there anyone in the audience wish to testify on behalf of this bill, House File 2017? Anyone in the audience with concerns? Does the department wish to testify? No. You're reserving your right, though. Okay, very good. Questions from members? Okay, thank you very much. With that, Representative McDonald reduces.
Mr. Chair?
Oh.
You asked
Chair
for questions,
Dabney.
but not, long, windy speeches.
Well, I'll take speeches too.
Okay.
Speeches are good. Chair Dabney.
I guess maybe I'll put it in the form of a question. Representative McDonald, why discriminate against Main Street retailers in Minnesota? Because that's what your bill is doing.
Representative McDonald, why do you want to discriminate against people?
Well, Mr. Chair, Representative Dabney, I do not want to discriminate against Main Street, Minnesota. I am Main Street, Minnesota. Right now, I have a little business on Main Street, Bridge Avenue, 141 Bridge Avenue, and I'm not discriminated against them or anyone.
Mr. Chair?
Well, Representative McDonald, if it's Bridge Avenue, how can it be Main Street?
Well, that's a good question, Mr. Chair.
I've got a lot of them. Chair Dabney.
It's hard to best your last question, but I'm going to try. If I go to Target, do I pay sales tax if I purchase a video?
Representative McDonald.
Target being a Minnesota employer, smaller than it used to
Mr.
be.
Chair, Representative Dabney, if you purchase a VCR video, no, they don't sell them anymore.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, someone should talk to Representative McDonald about VCRs. I don't think anybody buys them anymore, and I don't think Target sells them anymore. But a DVD, you pay sales tax on it.
Yes, you do.
Representative McDonald.
Mr. Chair.
If I download one from Netflix, why should we encourage people to download videos from Netflix rather than purchase them from Target? We're biasing the tax code through your bill against a major Minnesota employer and their sales.
Representative McDonald.
Mr. Chair, Representative, in order to purchase an item at a store, a bricks and mortar, you have to get in a vehicle, take the bus, take the train, use the public infrastructure that the taxpayers paid for, and therefore, there should be a tax there because you're using the infrastructure necessary to get you to the store. In downloading a digital item, there's no item, there's no tangible item. It's invisible. Why are you taxing something that's invisible, that costs no strain on infrastructure for police, fire, protection, and harm? So therefore, many in my district would argue that that is not a usable or a fair tax, to tax something that's invisible. But a product that you tangibly hold, that have to physically drive to and get to use the infrastructure, yes, it is necessary, I suppose, to have a tax to pay for that important services.
Mr.
Chair Dabney.
I can see this computer. Maybe you can't, Representative McDonald. But I'm sitting here using things that you tell me are invisible. It's not an argument of faith that I can work with programs that I can't see. I can't see the engine of the car while I'm driving it either, but it's still there. And if I get it, I think that we should have a tax code that doesn't pick winners and losers, and that in fact protects Main Street, Minnesota. Incenting people through the tax code to buy from Netflix rather than to buy from Target or whatever Walmart, whatever Main Street retailer you have, I think is poor tax policy and also doesn't recognize the direction of where purchases are going in Minnesota and the significant public investments in those. We're putting, as a state, significant money into expanding broadband. That's state money, state infrastructure that we get to use as Minnesotans to download the latest Taylor Swift song. And that tax money needs to be replenished just as the tax money for roads and bridges needs to be replenished, because it's all getting used and it all will need upgrades and maintenance and things like that. I'm going to stand with Minnesota retailers on this one and in opposition to your bill. Thank you.
Mr. Krantz. Thank you, Chair Dabney. Mr. Krantz.
So I think you raise an interesting question. I want to just offer a way to think about that question because, as somebody who's spent most of my career working to get the Quill case overturned and trying to make certain that there is a level playing field across the country for Main Street and online retailers, I think a lot about this. And the reality is that Main Street retailers selling books competing with an online retailer selling a book are at a competitive disadvantage. And there's nothing Minnesota can do to fix that. It is the nature of our constitutional limitations on the states, and it is the reason why there has been such a focus on getting Congress to step in and fix the quill problem. I think what Representative Dabney's bill does is say, I'm sorry, yes.
It was his bill that put the tax on.
What Representative McDonald's bill is an attempt to say, let's not allow that same type of discrimination to punish Minnesota businesses in the high-tech space. Because we can't fix the quill problem unless Congress steps in, we shouldn't impose this sales tax burden on Minnesota vendors. And it isn't only imposed on Minnesota vendors of digital content and services right now because of the nexus issue.
Mr. Chair?
Chair Dabney.
Just a quick response, and I think I'll say I share your frustration with the Quill decision and the inequitable taxing situation that leaves us in as a state. Amazon is now a Minnesota company. They're going to be hiring hundreds of people for a distribution center, if I recall correctly, in the Mankato area. I think it is. If Representative Considine were here, I'm sure he could tell us a lot about it. But I'm not sure that the intermediate step should be, let's bias further against Minnesota retailers by taxing their sales and not taxing the sales of digital products that we can, in fact, reach to. I pay sales tax on my Netflix account now. I pay sales tax on Amazon purchases. I believe I pay sales tax on iTunes. I'm not sure where Apple is in the state. I've long wanted to offer legislation that would apply the sales tax to any corporation that hired a lobbyist in Minnesota, but the lobbying community has encouraged me not to do that. I could extend it to, they don't have any clout. I could extend it to companies that fly in, lawyers, high-priced lawyers. I don't know. I could get creative here. But in the meantime, I don't think we should have a tax code that biases against Main Street retailers, as this does. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dabney. Representative Chair Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think most of what I was going to say was covered in Mr. Kranz's response, but, members, every element of taxation that government provides and extends and does to people and does to businesses and does to transactions is a discriminatory act. And that's the way I look at this. Representative McDonald, you are removing a piece of discrimination that was initiated by this body 2 years ago. Thank you for your bill.
Questions or comments from members? With that, Representative McDonald renews his motion that House File 2017 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Representative McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Kranz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Okay, item last. Before we get to the last bill here, for tomorrow's agenda, we have House File 1001, House File 1119, House File 1393, House File 837. Those basically all have to do with residency requirements as far as what the Department of Revenue can and can't do as far as taxing folks. That's the residency issue. And then we have House File 1901 and then House File 1972. And again, I'll repeat for members, actually from both sides of the aisle, that 1972 is the reviser's bill. We're looking at taking a vote on that. So if there are amendments needed or other things you are looking at doing, we don't have to worry about the 24-hour rule because we don't have a 24-hour rule. Okay, item last, Chair Garofalo is going to be here shortly. So what I think I'll do is I'll move House File 1478, and if Ms. Dalton could please explain what Chair Garofalo's bill does.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what House File 1478 does is it exempts from the Metropolitan transit area sales tax sales of electricity and natural gas. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you for that lengthy description. Thank you, Ms. Dahl. Okay, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify on behalf of House File 1478? Is there anyone that wishes to testify with concerns? Please come down if you would. And does the department want to make any comments on this bill? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cummings. I mean, not thank you that you don't have anything to say, but thank you. Okay, we have House File 1470. Could you please state your name and who you represent for the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Nancy Schuweiler. I'm a Dakota County Commissioner and a member of the county's Transit Improvement Board.
Could you help me out with the spelling and last name, please?
SCHOUWEILER. EILER.
Okay. And then we have Commissioner here?
Commissioner Peter McLaughlin from
Hennepin
Hennepin
County.
County, representing and chair of the county's Transit Improvement Board and appearing on their behalf today.
Who would like to start? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. The county's Transit Improvement Board, or also known as CTIB, is made up of 5 metropolitan counties: Dakota, Washington, Ramsey, Hennepin, and Anoka. And the sales tax that we collect is one that each of those county boards voted on and took the political risk, if you will, in order to impose. And it is utilized for the expansion of our transit system, both bus rapid transit as on the Cedar Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Way or Red Line in Dakota County. And it's also used to expand light rail in the metropolitan area. The funds that are collected are also used as a percentage of the ongoing operating and maintenance costs for those transit systems. And I'll let Chair McLaughlin talk to you more about the specifics of the bill.
Thank you, Commissioner Schuweiler. Commissioner McLaughlin, if you could please state your name and who you represent for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Peter McLaughlin. I am here representing the county's Transit Improvement Board, which I am the chair of. The county's Transit Improvement Board, as Ms. Schuweiler indicated, it's comprised of the 5 counties that approved the 0.25% sales tax. We have been investing in the expansion of the transit system in the metropolitan area, investing in both light rail and bus rapid transit since our inception. And since our inception in 2008, we have been able to help provide the match for over $700 million in additional federal funding coming in to expand our transportation system. This is the tax committee. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the transit side of this, but I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody in the room in indicating that CTIB is opposed to this reduction in revenue that was made available by the legislature and the opportunity, but it was the counties that actually imposed the tax, as Commissioner Schuweiler indicated. So we would oppose that reduction in our ability to expand the transit system. That's what we were created to do. I've got some Irish blood in me. There's a little irony in this bill, it seems to me, that actually one of Excel's biggest customers is actually Metropolitan Council. I think it's like the 3rd biggest customer of all with the combination of the LRT and the wastewater treatment. So to provide this exemption for a service that's actually generating revenue, the LRT system for the utilities is a little bit, there's some irony there. But really, as a former member of the tax committee, and I frankly think I predated the cookie tradition. So there wasn't a cookie tradition when I was on the tax committee. So it's a good new tradition, Mr. Chair. I saw that you enjoyed it very much.
I do enjoy that tradition. What years did you serve here?
I was from 1985 through 1990, and I was on the tax committee the last 4 of those 6 years.
And I came in 91, so I just missed you.
Just missed each other, yes, Mr. Chairman. So,
Chairman, I was just going to say the cookie tradition started in the Education Committee when I was chair of it, and we actually had competition, and we would take a vote at our last meeting as to who had the best bakery in their district. And the old-fashioned donut shop in Crystal always won. Now, I won't tell you who represented the old-fashioned donut shop, but you can probably make a pretty good guess.
Those cookies today would be tough to beat, though, by anybody.
And if you remember Senator or Representative Harry Mayers,
Yes,
he
very well.
actually had cookies or donuts brought in from Green Bay, Wisconsin, which was his hometown. He had them brought in by special courier. He was very competitive as to who would get the designation of having the best.
Chair Carlson, did Crystal still win that one?
Well, I no longer chair that committee.
Oh,
I don't-
okay.
In fact, after the last election,
Green Bay versus Crystal, and
I
I'm
appreciate you
Crystal.
referring to me as Chair Carlson, but something happened last November that changed some of that.
Once a chair, always a chair.
Thank you.
That's what I figured.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
If I might, as a former member,
We're
as a former
digressing.
member of this tax committee, I would offer that I think this is a bad direction for tax policy in the state of Minnesota. There are 47, as I understand it, there are 47 local sales taxes across the state. None, zero, has this kind of carve out for a particular industry. And I think that's the attempt is made to keep the base for the local sales taxes to be identical to what the sales tax base is for the statewide sales tax. If you move in this direction, you're starting to introduce inefficiency and complexity. It's going to raise the cost of putting the tax in place. I think it's not a good direction to go for tax policy in my view. So for the members of the committee and you, Mr. Chair, if you don't appreciate the irony as an Irishman might, you don't really have to like LRT or bus rapid transit to dislike this bill. I think it is a bad direction for state tax policy because you're starting to carve out one particular industry from local sales taxes, and you're going to be, I mean, if you think about the pile of bills that comes in each year, as I recall, on exemptions from the TIF legislation, I don't know that you'd necessarily want to be starting to introduce that sort of exercise here in the tax committee. So, Mr. Chairman, specifically on the tax policy side, that would be my argument, and you've heard my argument as chair did as well in terms of the resource. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the testifier, Mr. McLaughlin, I appreciate the irony of an Irishman, although I'm not sure what that means, but I appreciate it because I like the way it sounds. So I just want to let you know.
I'm working on you. Thank you.
It's ironic, right?
Okay. Questions for members? Thank you, Representative McDonald. Would, to either of the commissioners here, would the exemption be included if the governor's transportation transit increase goes forward?
I'm sorry, Mr.
Commissioner?
Chairman, I couldn't hear what you said.
Would this exemption be included if the governor's transportation transit increase goes forward?
Mr. Chairman, I would defer to the staff, but my first crack at this would be that this relates to the quarter-cent sales tax as it's defined in the bill that's already in place that the counties, the 5 counties put in place. So it does not pertain to the proposal that the governor has proposed. That's my understanding.
Then Mr. Michael?
Mr. Chairman, if you were to enact the governor's proposal and this proposal, the net effect would be that the governor's proposal would raise less revenue than what they're projecting because the base would be lower. If CTIP, I don't know how the governor's plan, but this reduces the base of that tax that the governor's plan includes in a proposal to increase.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Any other questions for members? If not, any closing comments to commissioners?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate that. Okay, with that, I will move that House File 1478 be later for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. With that, don't stop believing. Good government all the time.